Hi everyone, I'm Chris Darren, game director and creator of Remothered franchise.
So, Chris, talk about this game, Remothered Broken Porcelain. Like, what is this game all about?
This game is about a drama story that just changes and turns in something horror. Basically, we tell a common story about the human diseases, and it turns in something really terrible, dark, gothic. There's a lot of reference to great movies, like for example, sorry, The Shining, Misery, and The Silence of the Lambs, but also movies like Psycho and others. But it's also an allegory of the importance of the memory and the Alzheimer's disease and the effects of the Alzheimer's disease.
Now, the game doesn't take place in the 1800s, but it certainly does have that visual art style and feel like it's an older 1800s piece. What do you think it is about that time period that makes it such a good setting for horror games and movies?
My personal idea about the 70s and the perfect time to tell this story, it's because actually we don't have a smartphone, we don't have telephones, we don't have that way of technology that could somehow like exercise the fear of the of our old ancestors of that age, or for example my mother or my father, and I took a lot of their own experiences and the stories from my grandma, and for example, like the urban legends from Italy and especially here in Sicily. It's where I live and where the game is set. And I took a lot of references also about the scenarios, the settings. For example, the Felton House from the first Remothered is basically inspired by a real house that almost every day when I drive my car and I go, for example, to have a walk, I always meet and always encounter. And the Ashman Inn is also inspired by a particular place here in Sicilia that is Refugio Sapienza near the Volcano Etna. It's really up the Volcano Etna. And those old feelings from the old centuries or the old decades are still nowadays are still the same. It's like the time just stopped at that age. Sorry, and for me it's something magical. And if I go there still nowadays, and it's the 2020, I'm gonna find the same atmosphere and the same strange feelings inside my own emotional troubles and others. And they are still the same of those that my parents and my grandparents told me when they were kids.
People are not strangers to the survival horror genre. It usually involves like limiting ammo or controlling your resources. The really cool thing about your game that I really haven't seen in a lot of survival horror games, aside from alienization, are your hiding mechanics and your leaning mechanics. You seem to like go against walls and corners and kind of peek, and you have to be quiet and crouch and do all this really fun stuff. Talk about those mechanics and where the idea for creating those came up.
Yeah. Well, basically because the first idea of Remothered was born around 2007. It was a dark time for the survival horror games, the survival horror genre in general, because also the main sagas, for example, Resident Evil or Silent Hill and all the others, turned into the action approach to the genre, and all the old school fans like me and the others was still waiting for something like the old Clock Tower, Haunting Ground, or for example other game in the same genre, or Forbidden Siren, for example. So it was like my personal contribute to a genre that was almost forgotten. And for that reason, I decided to put this kind of gameplay to Remothered 100%, because if you have to feel the true fear and you have to feel the true unwishing atmosphere, there's no way better to put this into the experience of a little girl, of a woman, a common woman that you can meet every day, for example, Rosemary Reed, and they can just have to fight for their own lives. So was the main reason why I decided to push this way of gameplay to Remothered, Broken Porcelain, as well to Remothered Fathers and the franchise.
Some horror games go entirely supernatural. Some go completely for realism and just like, physical terror, and then some take the mental approach as well. The mental horror, like a Lovecraftian horror. Your game seems to do all three. Can you talk about that kind of decision?
Well, in Remothered, I tried really hard to maintain the story really realistic. There are sometimes some events that could be considered esoteric, but actually there could be always a scientific explanation behind. Actually, when we speak about psychology, there's never the rationalism and all the certainties that the human mind can have are just lost forever. For this reason, I used different that we lived, actually that our ancestors lived previously in time. For example, the post-traumatic stress disorder drugs, they were actually used for the soldiers that were coming back from, for example, the Second World War. As survivors, they had a lot of stress and a lot of hallucination and others. So these drugs were used to them to just forget those traumas and living back as they did before the war. And other events, for example, the fact of the clustered convents, that is really typical here in Italy. There's a lot of clustered convents with nuns that have no contact with the common world outside. They live totally as reclusion, and also the resignation of the gender. This was a really strict and problematic theme that I spoke about in the first Remothered, but here was really common that, especially before the Second World War, if there was someone with some inclination or pardon me, probably I cannot find the right word, so in case, just please help me. But if there was, for example, a female, a woman that was not that good with her body, or his father find out that she could be better as a man, there was a resignation in terms of gender. So they were forced to leave us, for example, in that case, as a male. So these are real stories that a lot of people could speak about, and I decided to put all these three together because they are part of the same coin, like two faces of the same coin. We have the extremism of the science, and we have the not extremism, but the like the blind of the religion, the obsession with the religion, and the fact that you think that you can find a solution while praying or asking to someone bigger for an help.
Can you talk about the environment we're exploring? These levels, like where are we? Where are we trying to survive in this game?
Broken Porcelain is set in a hotel, the Ashman Inn, that is really heavily inspired by the typical architecture and structure buildings that we can find here in Sicily, near the Rifugio Sapienza, where the Volcano Etna just grow bigger and bigger. And this is a big hotel that was actually a society, a farm society that was reopened and is going to be reopened on April 13, 1973. But something happens, and starting from the main housekeeper Andrea, but all the other inhabitants and workers at the hotel change when a ticketing of a metronome start just sounding beyond the loudspeakers at the hotel. And Jennifer and her best friends, first of all Lynn, and we're going to find out that she is going to have more than just a friendship with her, and also Eliza, that is a worker. They three are the younger, and they have to survive and to find out what is going on there.
So, I mean, like, horror games are nothing without their monsters, and like your game gives a very Silent Hill vibe. I've seen like the creepy nun, and I've seen also a deformed man with in a hood with a cane. Like, talk about some of these menacing people we'll encounter on our adventure, without giving away too much.
Well, I say the best I can say because I don't want to make any spoiler, but the game itself, the symbol enemy is the Red Nun, of course, and it's an invented order of nuns, also because I didn't want to unrespect nobody or the other nuns or some Christian order. But you're going to meet a lot of different enemies. For example, Porcelain, this strange and really tall figure with this figured face with porcelain like cracker with scratches and others, but also common people that become someone terrifying that will also become a menace. So it will be really hard also to challenging in terms of gameplay, because the same person that was helping you before is going to change forever and just bringing you to hide yourself and running away because he's going to hold an axe, for example, or a revolver. So there's a lot of high characterization. I tried the most to make them all credible, because also in this there's no enemy that could be considered like something like fantastic or
like a monster or a creature, right? They're all human.
Yeah, exactly.
So kind of going into that, your studio's overseas in Europe. When you were developing the game or making it, do you take into account like, you know, an American audience or anything like that, or do you just kind of make the game you want to make, if that's even a factor? Because sometimes it's not.
Well, of course, if I wanted to make the game that could sold more than 100,000 millions of copies, we know exactly what works in terms of game made for selling really well. You can put on the wonderful character, the sexy protagonists, or to the actions story really easy to follow, or an open world. And nowadays probably it's easier to make an open world than a single player story that just from a beginning it turns to an end. But I decided to make my own game, also followed by my partner at the Arts and my partners at Stormine Games, the developers. And I'm so happy that Modus argued our project, because it's a different way of making the game. Because in my own opinion, you don't only make video game to sell, as well you don't only make movies to sell, but also to tell a story, also to tell your own story. I don't want to say that it's my story, because fortunately I never lived something terrible or that's scary, but that was the story that was just given birth by my mind, and I'm happy that people is going to play with it. There are a lot of interesting choices of design and characters, probably not the one that the certain choice to sell more, but I'm okay with that because that was not our objective. Remothered to the Fathers was a surprise because despite the fact there was no true marketing design, not a true publisher, and the budget was really cheap. We sold probably around 2,000 copies, and so it was really a big success also because it's an Italian game. But I'm really happy because our audiences are not only Italian. Probably the Italian actually really didn't enjoy it that much because probably they are more focused on other kind of video games. But we had especially American audiences and the Japanese audiences. So I'm really proud about it also because the main example of the great series in survival horrors are Japanese or Americans.
Now, from a design standpoint and a creative standpoint, what are some of the challenges when making a narrative-driven game, as opposed to something like a battle royale or a multiplayer game? It's a very different process, I would imagine.
Yeah. Well, I can say this. Actually, we have a lot. We have a lot of different ideas. We also thought on making like a spin-off for a DLC with like a Dead by Daylight DLC with enemies fighting against the protagonists. But actually, our objective is still that telling a story, telling that story. And the fact that also we received wonderful critics reviews, audiences, and awards made us really more than proud because you know you don't think to make a game to be prized by the critics or to be well sold, but when you find both with just the first game you direct, it's a great experience and an emotional journey. So I'm really proud of it, and I'm sure that the people that love the first one is going to love more and more this second one, and also those people that didn't play the first one is going to appreciate this game.
I think, Chris, the last and most important question is, when does your game come out and what platforms will it be on?
Okay, the game will be available on October 13, and it will be available on PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, and Steam, of course, and in both physical and digital edition. So it's really a big difference compared to the release of the first game that we had first on Steam, then after 2 months on consoles, and then the physical edition. I'm really proud. I'm really excited. I'm also a little tired and sick, but it's okay. But I'm really excited, and I hope that people could really find out that we put not only our skills in this game with the best of our opportunities and our capacities, but also our hearts in it, and that is a little but big game made full of love.
That's great, man. And right in time for Halloween in the US, which is perfect timing.
Yeah.
Where can they go to find more information about your game? You have a website, Twitter
You can
page?
go on www.remothered.com or on the official page of Remothered, facebook.com/Remothered. There will be a lot of information, and don't forget to subscribe. There will be a lot of presents and gifts prepared by Modus Games for your subscription. And also remember to pre-order and wishlist on Steam. And in just a few days, just 11 days, oh my God, the game will be directly into your home, ready to be played and enjoyed on your console or PC.